All right, friends, get ready. We got an intense TED Talk today. We're going to be breaking down from Jocko. We just call him Jocko. It's like Moses or Madonna or something. He just goes by a first name. So it's a really powerful, really intense talk that Jocko gave. So let's just do it. Let's play the video. Let's roll.
War is a nightmare.
Now, this is a good way to actually start a talk, is one of the things he did really well there is he comes out to some applause and he doesn't do any like crowd warm up. He does, hey, how's everybody doing? I can't hear you. How's the conference been? I'm so glad to be here. I just want to thank all these like 19 people that made it possible for me to be here. Let's start with my mom. And like, listen, you don't need to do all of that stuff. So what Jocko does well here, he walks out, waits for the applause to die out, then he waits another second or so, and then he begins. So he comes out, he plants, he waits, he pauses, and then he begins. So at that point, from an audience perspective, he really has their attention, right? He's really leaning in, and he delivers one word, war, and again, people are immediately sucked in there and want to know where he's going.
War is awful. It is indifferent and devastating and evil. But war is also an incredible teacher, and it teaches you lessons that you will not forget.
Now, it's possible as a speaker, whenever you're giving a point that's kind of heartfelt, strong, powerful, there's some emotion behind it, which is exactly what's going on with Jocko right now. It's possible to go too far to the extreme of trying to deliver it with too much force, where it overemphasizes it, right? So he says war, and then he starts going through, and he's getting louder and more passionate, and so you can feel that from him. So I think with him, kind of his stature, his military background, the history that he has to be able to speak on this, I think it works. But it's something that you want to be aware of. Just because you're speaking louder or just because you're talking more forcefully doesn't necessarily mean that it's translating and coming across in the way that you intend it for the audience.
In war,
something else you can kind of notice here, and we've talked about this before, the different types of microphones. The mic that he's wearing is what's called like a Countryman mic, and it's a type of mic I actually prefer using. I think there's a lot of good reasons for using the one, but one of the things that you notice there is he has a clear piece of tape to his face holding that down, right? That's not uncommon there, and you got to kind of zoom in and kind of be looking for it. But just be aware that if you are having any type of issues with your microphone, especially if you're wearing a Countryman mic like that, just a clear piece of tape here or sometimes behind the ear work well just to hold it in place. Otherwise, the mic starts kind of jiggling around and it becomes distracting. It's not really doing what it's supposed to be doing.
You are forced to see humanity at its absolute worst. And you are also blessed. War teaches you about sorrow and loss.
Okay, let's talk about movement for a second. So one of the things that Jocko's doing is he's kind of just going from side to side, and whenever he's getting ready to deliver a point, he stops, turns to deliver it. But the pacing, the movement doesn't necessarily seem to have any type of rhythm or flow to it. It's just kind of like walking between thoughts, just thinking about what comes next there. So always be thinking through that if you're moving on the stage, move with purpose, move with intention, kind of know where you're going and know why you're going there. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be super robotic and, okay, now I'm going to take 5 steps over here and I'm going to stop and I'm going to deliver this next point. But be aware of your movements instead of just kind of like meandering or walking, just kind of wandering the stage, kind of thinking and processing, and then occasionally stopping to deliver. So just make sure when you're moving that you have meaning and purpose to that movement.
And pain. And it teaches you about the preciousness and the fragility of human life. And in that fragility, war teaches you about death.
So one of the things he's doing is, because this is a heavier talk, because this sounds like it's going to be, heavier is a good term there, but because of that, one of the things that he's doing is he's pausing a lot, which is good. It's really, really effective and powerful because it makes the moment even more powerful and allows the audience the chance for whatever he just said to really kind of sink in and sit there. So he just finished a sentence. He waits 2 or 3 seconds before delivering, which for speakers, oftentimes those 2 or 3 seconds feels like an eternity, but it's really, really powerful and effective if you can use the pause in that way.
Also teaches you about brotherhood and honor and humility and leadership.
Okay, I want to look here at the audience here, because this is something that we've talked a little bit about before, is that as a speaker, you want the audience as close together and as close to the front as possible. So you can see in this setup, it's a little harder to see because it's a little darker on the stage, but there's a lot of open seats throughout the audience. Now it still feels fairly full, so it's not bad, but ideally you want the audience as close to each other and as close to the front as possible. You can't always control the room, you can't always control the layout or the setup of the room, but as a speaker, you can control how everybody is seated and situated. Now ideally, you want to have whoever your MC is or whoever the event host is, you want them to help get that all situated. So as people are coming forward, it'd be good to even have like some ushers down those 2 aisles there on the sides, and have people who are kind of directing traffic, like maybe even blocking off the last 10 rows or so until those first rows are filled up, or even just asking people, hey, if you would do us a favor and just scoot as close to the front and as close to the middle as possible. And that way people are kind of filling in there, as opposed to the speaker getting up and trying to do it at the beginning of the talk, which I wouldn't recommend.
And unfortunately, war teaches you the most when things go wrong. One of the most impactful lessons that I learned from war in the city of Ramadi, Iraq, which at the time was the epicenter of the insurgency, where brutal and determined terrorists ruled the streets during an operation that I was in charge of when all hell broke loose.
All right, that's a great line. So he's starting to tell this powerful story of when he was serving in Iraq, and he leads it to, I was leading my troops when all hell broke loose. Now, as an audience member, we're immediately captivated, we're immediately engaged, we want to know where this story is going to go. And this is something, again, we've talked a lot about before, but stories are extremely powerful, extremely effective for speakers to use, because as an audience member, right now, we don't know where this story is going to go. This could be a happy ending, it could be a sad ending, it could be a tragic ending. We have no idea what's going to happen. All we know is that all hell has broke loose, and we are immediately engaged, wanting to know what happens next. So from an audience perspective, we're immediately locked in and engaged. So from a speaker, make sure that you use stories as much as possible. Sad stories, happy stories, funny stories, silly stories, all types of stories can be very, very effective for drawing an audience in and capturing their attention.
We had multiple units out on the battlefield fighting the enemy. We had friendly Iraqi soldiers, we had U.S. Army soldiers and U.S. Marines, along with small elements of my SEAL team. And then the fog of war rolled in with its confusion and chaos and mayhem, and with its gunfire and enemy.
You can see there's another piece of tape on his neck, just again kind of holding that back. So anytime that you're wearing a microphone, whether it's a Countryman like that, or a lav mic, a lavalier mic, or a lapel mic is what they're called sometimes, is you really don't want all the cables and wires hanging out. It's just kind of distraction. It feels less professional. So that's why that's all taped down back there. So again, it's more hidden and out of the way, and it's not kind of like hanging and flopping around in the background.
The attacks and screaming men and blood and death. A horrendous firefight broke out. But this firefight, it wasn't between us and the enemy. This firefight, tragically, was between us and us.
Okay, so one thing he did well there is, again, using pauses very, very effectively. And so anytime that you can say something and you allow the audience to get there before you deliver the line, it's really powerful. This works really well with humor as well. But in this case, he says, tragically through a series of these various events, the firefight wasn't from the enemy, it was from us to us. And for most audience members, I found myself in my own mind going to that point of saying to us in my mind of where he was going to finish that sentence. So again, pausing, allowing the audience to get there. So an example might be, if you were talking about Vegas, that what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. And so you had already thought the line in your head. So when I say it, it just kind of confirms and reaffirms for you where we were going with the talk. And again, it keeps you engaged.
Friendly forces against friendly forces. Fratricide. The mortal sin of combat. And the most horrific part of war. And it was reported up the chain of command what had happened. That we had fought and wounded and killed each other. And when we got back to base, things didn't get much better. There was a message waiting for me from my commanding officer. And it said, shut down all operations. It said that the commanding officer, the master chief, and the investigating officer were inbound to my location. And they told me to prepare a debrief to explain exactly.
Now, what he's kind of walking through here is, here's the situation that happened, and now all of a sudden it's clear he's in trouble, and he's going to have to answer for it. He's responsible for it. So one thing's always to remember is, as a speaker, is that remember your audience, to be aware of your audience. So he is talking to a group of civilians who, as he's describing some of this, it's clear that he is in trouble and that the bosses are coming to want to know what happened and what took place. But he's talking in some type of military language and some kind of military lingo where it may go over the heads of some people and going I don't fully understand what this means. So anytime that you can use any type of analogy or any type of comparison of this thing that I'm describing, it would be like if this took place in your life, and it's able that way for people who are able to connect the dots. And so that's one way to think about it. Of here's another way to approach this, or here's another way to think about this situation that he's dealing with.
Exactly what had happened on the operation and what had gone wrong. It meant that somebody had to pay. It meant that somebody had to be held accountable. It meant that somebody had to get fired for what had happened. So I began to prepare my...
And so he did a little bit of that just there, of being able to say, listen, I knew what this meant. I knew that someone was going to be in trouble, someone was going to be held accountable, someone was going to have to pay, someone was going to get fired. And so for an audience member of adults who are thinking, wow, I wonder what that would be like in my job, in my world. So connecting the dots there is a bit of what he just did to, again, kind of simplify it, make sure that people are on the same page, that there's a chance I could lose my job right now.
My debrief. And in it, I detailed every mistake that was made and who made it. And then, when I was about 10 minutes from starting the debrief, that answer came, and it hit me like a slap in the face. And I realized that there was only one person to blame for the confusion, only one person to blame for the wounded men, and only one person to blame for the dead Iraqi soldier. And I knew exactly who that person was. And with that knowledge, I walked into the debriefing room with my commanding officer, and the master chief and the investigating officer were sitting there waiting for me, along with the rest of my men, including my SEAL that had been wounded, who was sitting in the back of the room with his head and his face all bandaged up. And I stood up before them and...
So he's doing a good job painting the picture of what this is like. So it's not like, people wanted to know who was accountable, so I went in and I told them, it was me, it's my bad. But he's painting the picture of this is the scenario of I'm in front of not only my bosses, bosses, way up the food chain here, of people who are wanting to know what happened and what went wrong, but also I'm with the people that I could hypothetically incriminate from basically from the way he describes this, and I'm with these people who were injured, people that were hurt from my decisions and other people's actions and decisions. So he's really doing a good job, again, painting the entire picture so people feel like we're there. And that's an important piece there. People feel like you're there in the story.
I asked them one simple question. Whose fault was this? And then another SEAL raised his hand. And he said, boss, This was my fault. I didn't properly identify my target, and I shot and killed that friendly Iraqi soldier. This was my fault. And I said, no, this wasn't your fault either. And it wasn't yours or yours or yours, I said as I pointed to the rest of the SEALs in the room. And then I told them that there was only one person at fault for what had happened. There was only one person to blame. And that person was me. I knew that to maintain my integrity as a leader and as a man, I had to take responsibility. And in order to do that, I had to control my ego so that my ego did not control me. And you know what? I didn't get fired. In fact, my commanding officer, who had expected excuses and finger pointing, when I took responsibility, when I took ownership, he now trusted me even more.
Now, you want to remember that the audiences are always asking themselves two questions, right? So what? And now what? So what? And now what? So he's starting to make this transition of telling this powerful story of what happened in war, and the audience is asking, so what? So what? That's crazy that happened. That's unfortunate that happened. So what? What does that have to do with me as an audience member? People are always wondering, like, what's in it for me, right? The audience doesn't care about you. They want to know what's in it for me. So that's a bit of what he's making this transition is, so what? And then the now what piece. Now, what do you want me to do as a result of this? That's crazy that happened to you. I see how you took ownership. I see how you took responsibility. Now what? What do you want me to do with this information?
Team takes ownership of its problems. The problems get solved. And that is true on the battlefield, it is true in business, and it is true in life. So I say, take ownership. Take extreme ownership.
So again, now we're getting into the now what. Okay, so what do you want me to do as a result of this? So don't make excuses, take ownership, take extreme responsibility for your actions, for what it is that you do.
Get control of your ego. Take ownership of your mistakes, take ownership of your shortfalls, take ownership of your problems, and then take ownership of the solutions that will get those problems solved. Take ownership of your mission.
Again, a couple times here, he's gone into kind of military mode where he comes across mean or harsh or aggressive, and I think that's just kind of his nature. But again, you want to be aware of that as a speaker, as how you're coming across. If you come across to the point that to an audience that you come across too mean, or like you're angry at the audience, like the audience did something wrong, or you're coming across in a way that's intimidating to the audience, then they will feel further disconnected from you. Like they can't relate to what it is that you're talking about. So again, just something to be aware of.
Take ownership of your job, of your team, of your future, and take ownership of your life. Lead yourself and your team and the people in your life. Lead them all to victory. Thank you.
Very good pause at the end there. Lead them all to victory. Thank you. Again, that pause feels long. It's just like, like as a speaker, it just feels like an eternity. But again, that creates a much more powerful moment. The other thing he did there is, you notice he plants, he stands, lead them all to victory. So he's not still wandering around, not walking across the stage, but plants, delivers, pauses, thank you, end. Okay, now this is another thing that we've talked about before, is notice that some speakers will make the mistake of thank you and then immediately dart off stage, right? But you want to stay there, stay in the presence, right? So all he's doing right now is not like anything vain or conceited or anything. He's just acknowledging the audience. Thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed the presentation. I hope it was helpful. I hope it was inspiring. I hope it supported you in some way. Thank you. He's just thanking them for basically thanking him. Overall, great presentation from Jocko there. I'm sure he feels much more comfortable in the military battlefield than he does on stage in front of an audience. But really, really well done from Jocko. All right, there you go. Hope you enjoyed that video breakdown of Jocko's TED Talk. Really good stuff there. Hey, as always, if you like this video, make sure you subscribe to the channel. We do these video breakdowns, these speech breakdowns every single week. Don't want you to miss out on these. Want to show you how you can become a better speaker, whether you're giving a keynote or a TED Talk or whatever your next presentation is at work or church or wherever you are. We want to help you become a better speaker and build your speaking business. So again, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to like this video and comment below with two things. Number one, what is the main thing that you learned? What's the takeaway that you're going to apply to your next presentation? And number two, let us know if there's a talk or a presentation that you would like for us to break down in one of our upcoming breakdown videos, all right? So let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe. Catch you next time, my friend. You're awesome.